All right, good morning, everyone, and good morning to everyone online. It's my privilege to again bring you a message as I believe the Lord has burdened my heart with it. And as you could see, the title, Lazarus, a man that Jesus loved. And there's so much in that title that it's going to take the rest of this morning's service to explain that to you. But to begin with, I think there's one thing that jolts us out of our world of unreality in which we are so busy with every day. And that is the whole idea of a death. And I'm not talking about a physical death. Because the truth be told, all of us as Christians believe in the resurrection of the physical body one day. And it's something that we don't need to really think of, especially when you're young, because it's somewhere in Never Never Land, way off. But there is so much more in terms of a death that needs to be worked to bring us out of the theoretical into the authentic, that as far as my understanding is concerned, this is inevitable. It has to happen. Because if there's one thing that is fibrous, with deep roots, and very cantankerous to uplift, it is that natural man and his desire to stay in control. If there's one thing we don't like, it's being out of control. It's being fully dependent on God. If God doesn't do something, then we're in trouble, right? But it's the kind of life that many who call themselves by the name of Christ are unfamiliar with, because it's just too costly. So maybe the message is not for everyone. But it's also a very big encouragement. See, most Christians I know desire resurrection life. That victorious, unending life. But they never really consider that that life must and can only follow death. And that's not something we like. It makes you feel uncomfortable. Already, you sit there and you think, oh, this is going to cost me something. Well, that's exactly it. There is no other way in Christianity. That's what makes it so different. He died for us. You die in Him. It's an exchange of life for life, and we need to understand what that really means. Let me emphasize it again. He died for us, and true life is dying in Him. And as I said, there's nothing in this world that we are immune to and resist as much as that thought. Okay? And so I want to begin with this statement. If God is not actual in the believer's life, meaning a present, outworking reality. If God is not actual in the believer's life, he, the believer, can have accurate theology and correct doctrine, but be in a state of self-deception. We assume that by the mere fact of knowing something, we are that very thing. And we can't work this life in ourselves. It's God who works within us and who works through us, and necessarily at a point of our own inability to bring about something that will glorify Him. And as you could see from the title this morning, Lazarus, a man that Jesus loved, was not redeemed or could bypass the reality of himself dying in a state of sickness, while in the back of his mind he might have thought, well, Jesus loves me, this I know. And just in time, he's going to heed to my human urgency and save me out of this predicament. But is he going to do that? That's the pressing question. And that's what we need to look at. And so we're going to first begin with that very familiar story of Jesus raising Lazarus. I'll make a few comments and then go into the core of what needs to be said. So John 11 verse 1. Now a certain man named Lazarus was ill. He was of Bethany, the village where Mary and her sister Martha lived. This Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was now sick, might I add, unto death. Now look at this. So the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love so well is sick. With the idea that the Lord will heed the call because his love is going to motivate him to move urgently and quickly and respond to this human crisis. And so I find it interesting that the emphasis, he whom you love so well is sick. Because there are so many of us that knows the Lord and we love him and he loves us, and we think as a consequence we will be spared. But what we tend to forget is that there is so much of that old nature, of that Adamic thing, that selfishness within us. We forget that the Lord will necessarily have to do a work which is going to be incredibly uncomfortable to us, but will result in resurrection life which is without decay and to his glory. And so we see this interesting statement of him whom you love. And a lot of us make that same claim. Lord, you love me, so I know you'll spare me. You're going to be gentle with me. I don't have to go through anything that's going to cost me even my life. Right? When Jesus received the message, he said, this sickness is not to end in death, but it is to the honor of God. Now I want to tell you something, folks. That the type of faith that the Lord needs to instill in us is a faith even unto death. Even if he doesn't come. Because that in actual fact is the type of faith you claim to have, that one day, even if you die, though he believe in me, yet shall he live. That's the faith you have, right? As far as the physical body is concerned. But what about the rest? Is he just the Lord of the resurrection as far as the physical body is concerned, or is he the Lord of the resurrection of everything? You find marriages on the rocks. It comes to an end, and there's a choice to be made, where the cross can have its perfect work, and you die, and the Lord resurrects something that will now be to his glory. Have you ever thought about that? It's a devastation that we don't want. We are so vulnerable. Have you ever noticed how vulnerable human beings are? Everything must just be perfect. They need to be in control, because their peace depends on their environment. But what if the Lord makes you despair? All hope in the natural dies. And you think you're hoping in God, and yet he allows you to get to that point of it actually dying. You had so many good ideas for the Lord. You had so many plans. You really wanted to glorify him. And him who Jesus loves is now crying out and he's not responding. Is it to death, or does the Lord have his own interest at heart and your sanctification? That's the question. This is not very comfortable. I mean, already you have stock expressions. Now look at this. when Jesus received the message, he said, "This sickness is not to end in death, but it is to the honor of God and to promote His glory." Are you willing? That's the question. Are you willing, for the sake of His glory, to allow Him to work at your cost, a death in whatever area, so that glory and resurrection can come forth? I guess most don't even understand what that statement means, because we have ourselves so strongly still intact, and we are so well informed about good doctrine, but God is not actual. You see, a guy like Daniel, you don't tell him that lions bite. He's not subject to that. In that place of extremity, that's where God is revealed. But we are just too afraid to give up our own lives to allow Him to be God of the resurrection. See? And so we see the Son of God must be glorified. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. You see, the motive is all the time love, but also the glory of God. Okay? Therefore, even when He heard that Lazarus was sick, let's link the two together. He loved them, therefore. He has a plan for them. They need to become sons and daughters of God. There has to be a transition from the natural to the supernatural. And so we see He loved them yet. Still, He stayed 2 days longer. Now, why on earth would that be true? Can you imagine your own life? Lord, you love me. I guess you better move. You made some promises, Lord. But do you know that Jesus is the one that said, if you love Him, you take up your cross. Do you know you don't just carry that thing? It has to do a work within you. The reason why Christianity is so ineffective, okay, and so anemic, it's because it's an exercise in intellectuality, not a practice. It's not an outworking of this life within us as we yield willingly to the one who said, I'm the resurrection and the life. You see, whatever is raised from the dead is permanent. Can you imagine Abraham bringing his son Isaac, whom he loved, his firstborn, and he gives him up, only to receive him, according to the book of Hebrews, back from the dead? Don't you know that henceforth that relationship is permanently changed? All human affections died in the giving up, and all to the glory of God is resurrected in the giving back. But what if He doesn't give anything back? Are you still willing because it's to His glory? What if it pleases Him that in bringing certain things to death, He will be glorified? What if? You see, that's the question. Because if we have at heart the glory of God, then we have a confidence in Him that He is the resurrection and life. But if not, can we say as Job said, if not, I'll still serve Him. You see, as long as we get what we want, we'll serve Him. But what if all of that comes to an end? And I don't guess, I want to say that is the path towards true spiritual actualization of God in your life. Right? Are you familiar with what I'm saying? We get to the edge and then we walk away. Because it's going to cost me. I've got to give up and trust God for everything. But God, I came here. I did what you said I must do. I have your kingdom in view. And now it all dies. Really? Was that really the motive? Or is there a purging, a cleansing, a weakness that needs to be worked in the flesh and a strength in the Lord that needs to be worked? Something completely different. Yet He waited 2 days longer. Why? So death could have its full work. Because if you know anything about Jewish tradition, Why 3 days dead? Because in that environment, after 3 days, the body would decompose and they will know for sure he's dead. Why not intervene before he dies? Because he can heal. Why let him die? You love him, why do you do that? You see, folks, we need to have a transition of natural hope towards a spiritual hope in the Lord, irrespective. We need to have that. And I guess at this point I can ask, who of you want that? Because the reality of true Christianity is going to cost you your life. Don't let anybody tell you it's for free. That's a lie. You can have life, but it's not for free. You got to give up yours. You know, he's no fool who give what he can't keep to gain what he cannot lose, right? So John 11 reads further. He said these things and then added, our friend Lazarus is at rest and sleeping. He knew very well what happened already because he tarried. Now just put yourself in the feet of Lazarus. He's seen the ministry of Jesus. He saw how his sister was restored and delivered. He saw how people got healed. And I'm pretty sure the Bible says if they had to write down all the miracles that Jesus did, there wouldn't be books enough. I'm sure he saw much of that and with great expectation sent for Jesus because he can fix it as long as you stay intact, as long as you're alive. But you see, there's a transition that needs to happen. Can I trust him beyond death? You see, he didn't say for nothing, I am the resurrection and the life. But how many of us actually know that? Not know it, but know it by dying. And so we read, the disciples answered, Lord, if he's sleeping, he will recover. However, Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he referred to falling into a refreshing natural sleep. So then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, see, what is at play here? The glory of God, the resurrection life, and the honor of Christ. I'm glad that I was not here. It will help you to believe. It will help you to believe. You see what we need? We need a faith that's beyond the natural. Because I can guarantee you, once you have been brought to that place without resistance, and the Lord worked the death that he needs to work in you in various areas of your life, and he resurrects it, that's when you will also have a testimony of the resurrection life in future. I just don't get how people are telling me that they have faith that even though they will succumb in their mortal frame to death, they have faith that he will resurrect them, but they don't have faith that even if he brings anything in the natural to a death, that he can resurrect it. You see? Guys, can you hear what the Lord is saying? Not me. In verse 15, and for your sake I'm glad that I was not there. It will help you to believe. So when Jesus arrived, he found that he, Lazarus, had already been in the tomb 4 days. I'm going to carry on to the next points before I go on. His sisters now said, Lord, if you had been here. Twice, both of them said it. It reflects the pain of waiting in the face of an inevitable death, and the feeling that God is too late or might not care. Been there before? Lord, we're running out of time. A lot of people have faith for as long as everything's intact. But I mean, here we find this man decomposed already, smelling. There's no hope of a natural resurrection in that. There was a faith, a limited faith in the natural, because as long as I can see it, sure enough, God can still do something. But can he even do something when there is nothing left, when it's already subject to the working of death and decomposed? That's the question. Can you see? He's not sparing Lazarus. Lazarus, whom he loved, is going to be the example for us to follow. So the certainty of being intimate friends with Christ and being personally loved by Him is replaced. Can you imagine? You get sicker and weaker, and death is starting to set in. Now comes doubt, disappointment, and hopelessness. Where is He? It's too late. Have you been there? In my life, I've learned this lesson. That's why I share it with you many times. In weakness, all the time. Thank God for that, because I know myself. I like to fight. And then the Lord said, okay, since you like to fight, you have to be brought to a place of weakness. Otherwise you make yourself count, and then everything smells of flesh. And not decomposing flesh, but sweat. Okay? And so, how is it that God did not rush to the bedside of his sick friend the moment he hears the news? Why did he tarry? That's the question. And does that happen where you are? Not all of us are in the same place. But there are things you don't understand, and you know what you do. Because you have a natural faith like the sisters. If only you had been here. If things were still intact in the flesh, you could have done something, but it's now too late. Okay? So God's timing serves a greater purpose. Not comfort, but the glory and His glory and our sanctification. And let's go on. So she said in verse 21, Martha then said to Jesus, Master, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. It's a faith this side of the grave. And even now I know that whatever you ask God, He will grant it to you. Jesus said to her, your brother shall rise again. Now look, she didn't really mean that. God will grant it to you, but He then says to her, look, your brother will live. What's her response? Oh yeah, I know. He will rise in the resurrection at the last day. Now folks, there's such a message here. This is what we say. Oh no, we know one day He will resurrect us. If you can't trust Him now, even unto a death, how do you think you'll have that faith when you're finally facing natural death? That's to live in self-deception. You see, if the death and resurrection life is constantly at work in me, that will just be a natural transition. But if you're unfamiliar with it because you kept yourself intact and you kept yourself strong and you kept on making your own plans and standing in that piece of fibrous flesh, if you kept on doing that, that will be the ultimate devastation. It has to be actual. So she said, no, we know that's going to happen one day. What does He say? I myself am the resurrection and the life. Don't you know? He called ex nihilo, something out of nothing. He holds the keys. So the natural is not a limitation, neither is anything else. Okay? I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he was dead, yet shall he live. Do you believe that? Okay, guys, do you hear? Do you believe that? You see, because we get so discouraged, we trust the Lord for so many things and nothing happens. As a matter of fact, since I've trusted Him, it's gone from bad to worse. I thought it's going to go from bad to turn around to glory, hallelujah. But He's not sparing me. Yet I love Him and I think He loves me. And He's not sparing me. What is happening here? And there is an internal conflict on the inside. Do I now become hopeless? Do I now despair? Or is He working a work to transition me beyond the grave of everything, to trust Him so that whatever He resurrects will be resurrected to His glory, and whatever He leaves in a grave doesn't belong in any way? Whoever continues to live and believes and cleaves into me shall never actually die at all. But this is a universal principle in the life of the Christian. You want to follow me? You're not worthy of me if you don't take up your cross. What is he talking about? It's so essential to understand, folks. We're not just talking about the historical death of Christ and the resurrection. We're not talking about a future resurrection. We're talking about a present outworking. It's the reason why Christianity is feeble and weak and impoverished, because it's intellectual, because on the inside we are so well acquainted with the fact that this is going to cost me something. And the resistance is heavy. We fight it with all our strength. It's almost what we do in the natural. You get sick, you take the vites, you take the nebulizer, you take whatever you can, as long as death doesn't have its way in you. We just need to get through this. Now, you see, he wants to go see them, and the sister says, "You know, Lord, there's a stench." What she's actually saying is, you know, it's too late. You can't even go near him. It's decomposed. And here's the point. She believed, but only to a point. Her faith is limited by rational expectations. How many of us are exactly like that? Are you trusting the Lord? Yes, because everything is still intact and I'm in a good way. You know? I've got the wind from behind. I've got a nice downhill. Things are going my way, so I guess it must be God. But that type of faith is rational. I mean, this is ridiculous, isn't it? That you actually have to trust God against the natural, that you have to trust God beyond what you see, and that He's going to do something at your expense. Look, I don't think we understand the worth of the sons and daughters of God. And we don't understand the depth of the work He has to do so that Christ could be formed within us. If I want to see Christ formed within me, He walked before me. He died and was resurrected. You die, He will resurrect. And He will resurrect only that which will bring Him glory. So we see that future affirmation, but not the present reality. And that's where we want to get to. And so we carry on. So she went to her sister and said, "Look, the master's here." She jumped up and ran to him, of course. And look what she says. When Mary came to the place where Jesus was and saw him, verse 32, she dropped down on his feet, at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Same story. Same story. When Jesus saw her sobbing and the Jews who came with her, He was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Now, I don't know if you know what that means. Why was He weeping and why was He moved? The word is to be upset. Don't you know who this is that you claim you put your trust in? He already said, "I myself am the resurrection and the life." Do you believe that? But now you demonstrate a limited faith and trust in Him. Your faith limited to the natural. Your faith limited to what you can see. Your faith limited to what you think can still be redeemed. And there's nothing beyond that. Okay? And he was chafed. And I wonder often how much the Lord is chafed with us. Because we claim a belief in Him. as long as we can control everything. We claim a belief in Him as long as we can get what we want. As long as we're comfortable, right? You see, folks, going through a necessary death will release you from the grip of the world. Then you're in this world but not of it. Because you've died to the world, as Paul said in Galatians 6. I've died to the world and the world to me. Really? Let's see if that's true. And once that has happened, you become a steward of what you have, not an owner. Okay? Nothing has a hold on you. And you direct under the headship of the great shepherd. But we have to get there to be true sons and daughters of God. And only He can take us there. No man willingly brings himself to a cross. No man willingly crucifies himself. The Son and the Son only is the one who did that and can do that in you. But you see, you have to know Him, that though He will lead you through that valley of shadows of death. Can you trust Him there? There's so much of us that needs to be taken out of the way. Let's go further. So Jesus wept. The Jews said, see how tenderly He loved him. But some of them said, could not He who opened a blind man's eyes have prevented this man from dying? Same story 3 times. We see this now. A limited faith. Who is standing in front of them? Who do they claim to have close relationship with? They must have seen Him raise others from the dead, because Lazarus wasn't the only one. He actually said that through the prophets in Isaiah. He raised the dead. Okay? So verse 39, Jesus said, take away the stone. And his sister said, Lord, by this time he is decaying and throws off an offensive odor. He's been dead for 4 days. What's the point? He's really dead. And the point there is, as far as we are concerned, you see, you have this natural hope and faith. He's not really going to take me through this, is he? He's not going to allow this because, I trust Him. He loves me. He cares for me. And yet He does. That guy's never been dead before. Anyway, so guess what? He doesn't spare the ones He loved. That's the big message. The man that Jesus loved is now allowed to go through something to the point of actual decay. There's nothing left. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you and promise you that if you would believe and rely on me, you would see the glory of God? What is this all about? In the end of the day, you know that there was this prefigure in Lazarus of the resurrection from the dead. There's a pattern for every believer to follow. And there's this hope with one thing in view. Who will be glorified? You see, that's where the problem really lies. God is not actual because we want to stay intact. And we are not even remotely considering how God will be glorified. You see, if you go to the Middle Eastern context of how God relates to us, it's covenantal, it's filial, it's family, it's relational. And if you live in that relationship, you know what? Their identity is collective. The honor of the head is preserved through the conduct of the family. And so when the family really is knit together in such a manner that they in covenant and relationship, they seek one thing only, to maintain the honor of the family and more so of the head of that family. And if we are really claiming to be grafted in, that is the concern. Lord, how will it honor you? Can we say like Job, though he slay me, yet will I serve him? To me, those are probably some of the most profound statements of faith I could find in the whole of the Bible. Whatever will glorify him. Lord, my life belongs to you. See, that's being sold out. That's giving up. You see, but in the back of your mind, you sit and calculate what you're willing to give up. I can't give anything that costs me nothing. And that, unfortunately, dear friends, is the very thing. The thing that you preserve is the thing that he wants. And not this, that, and the other thing. You know what he wants? You think it's things. It's the one that holds the things that he wants. He doesn't need your things, okay? He needs you. Because then he's got everything. And that's where the battle really lies. That's why we live in a fake Christian world. And so we see, when he had said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And out walked the man who had been dead. Sure. Second Corinthians 5:16 now says something. Something radical happened here. Those two women who loved him and who had their limited faith had a complete change of understanding. Lazarus went through that death and was resurrected, and I can guarantee you, he had a completely different understanding of who this master was. Because even though he already decayed and was subject to death, the Lord gave life, which is beyond human understanding. Guys, you know, if you talk to anybody in the world and you talk about resurrection from the dead, they'll tell you you're mad. But if you live it in this world, you have something to say. Consequently, because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and because he is the resurrection and the life, look at this. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:16, from now on we estimate and regard no one from a purely human point of view. Now look at what he says. No, even though we once did estimate Christ from a human point of view as a man, yet now we have such knowledge of him that we know him no longer in terms of the flesh. You know, we trusted him limitedly. We trusted him in the natural. We trusted him as far as we could see, feel, smell. But then resurrection life came. Death is not an issue for him. He holds the key in every aspect where death is worked. And now I can't look at him the same way anymore. You need to sing that song, I'll never be the same again. You see, once you've had an encounter with life, you're spoiled for religion. Because you know something better. No grave can hold him. And if that's true, do I believe that? Can I believe beyond what he takes me through? Can I believe that whatever he resurrects will be resurrected? Whatever is resurrected is not subject to destruction. Whatever is resurrected is not subject to decay. Whatever is resurrected is permanent. But am I even willing for that? Whatever is dead is better left there. Because whatever is resurrected will be for his eternal purposes and for his glory. And is that really our heart? That's the question. And so we need to come to a place where we need to say, well, I've heard of him in Sunday school. I know theoretically about him. I have the right doctrine. And can I now say, like Job said, through hearsay did I become acquainted with you, but now I've seen you with my own eyes. What a profound change. I've heard about you. Most Christians I know gossip about the Lord. They talk about somebody they don't know because God is not actual. But when we understand this, and He takes us through this because we are willing and we want to know Him more. And we cry like Paul cried, oh, if I can only become more acquainted with Him, if I can conform to His death. You say, what? Conform to His death, yes, so that I can be a participate in His resurrection life. I mean, Paul, who wrote the majority of the New Testament, 2/3 they say, had one thing in view, to become acquainted with Christ, but he knew that it's going to cost him his life. Are you willing for that? That's the question. How far does our Christianity go? I guess it's at this point where you separate the sheep. I don't want to say from the goats, but the sheep from the sheep. You will never know Him in the resurrection life unless you know Him in the death also. And as I said before, a faith which is not unto death is no faith. Are you listening? A faith which is not unto death is no faith. Let die whatever needs to die, because I know better. And even if it's not going my way, then it's better that way, because in the end, the one that sees the end from the beginning knows what is best for His kingdom and His glory, because I'm part of another family. Now, the point I want to make about this resurrection life is this. Number one, it's historical, and we all understand that, and we get so excited about it. And then at the bottom of the 4 there, you can see it's eschatological. There's a promise of a future resurrection. But the two I'm very concerned with is in the middle, the personal and the transformative. And it's the one thing we don't know. Can you see that? There are 4 ways to look at the resurrection. Historical, or eschatological, or the actual now, the personal and the transformative. And that's where we want to dig in. That's what we want to understand. So we see this theme throughout the scriptures. And that's why, folks, I am, in my personal walk with the Lord, convinced of one thing. There's no other way. And there's no easy way. If you want the life, you have to follow Him in a death. I have seen so many people conjure up a type of soulish energy in various ways to try and portray a life that you cannot fake. It rings hollow when the actual demands come. It confuses, because as I said at the onset, if God is not actual, you can have the right doctrine, but you can be self-deceived. And so we need this work more than anything else. Paul wrote in Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ, therefore I no longer live. What does he mean by that? Does he mean that, something in future will happen and it's a mere shallow confession now? Or is it a continuous outworking of the cross every day? You see, everything of us needs to be brought to that place. Everything. Death produces life and freedom. What a apparent contradiction. Death produces life? Yes. You see, you have a natural and a spiritual. And the mere fact that you breathe and that you're alive physically doesn't mean you're alive spiritually. The mere fact that you get excited about truth doesn't mean you've yielded to it. So John 12:24 says, truly, truly, I say to you, unless the grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Can I tell you something? As long as you're intact, chances are that you will not be fruitful in the kingdom. You see, but once life springs up, which is the result of that giving up of self, you'll become fruitful. I've always been bothered about the shallowness of Christians' compassion and love for the lost. As a matter of fact, I'm not even surprised to see how they can condone the slaying of people for the sake of their eschatology. This has never worked in them. You see, you become fruitful with the heart of God once this has worked in your life. Romans 6 says, we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing. So that what happens? So that there can be participation in resurrection life. Folks, don't you see that it's not an historical event? It's not a mere confession. It's not just going through the baptismal waters in a symbol of dying with Christ. Once you start at the cross, you'll discover in this world you'll never move away from it. It's an exchange of life for life as long as we're in this world. Now, Philippians 3:10, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection. Now look at this. And may share his suffering, become like him in his death. Can you say that? You see, he said, I myself am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? You know, to me as a Christian, this is an immense challenge. It makes me wiggle in my seat. It makes me highly uncomfortable because I can just see something's going to have to die. Not that he wants things to die to spoil and ruin this life for us, but he wants to make us really alive. What a freedom it is once you've died to the world and the world to you, so that you can live to God. Nothing holds you back. You can just do what you need to do. And so we see the Lord himself said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. How interesting that that word just popped in there. Daily. You see, the cross should become a way of life for you. And the reason why Jean sits there and smiles, because he watched me groan and moan as I was fighting this whole story in different areas. So I guess it's first and foremost for me again. I'm just doing this for me, okay? To remind myself. Been there before, but sort of forgot. Got too busy again. I've been weight training my soul again. For my determined purpose again is that I might know him. Is that the thing we have in our hearts? Now further, I want you to think about this. Always carrying about in the body the liability and the exposure to the same putting to death that the Lord Jesus suffered, so that the resurrection life of Jesus also may be shown forth by and in our bodies. What is he talking about? This very thing. For we who live are constantly being handed over to death for Jesus' sake, that the resurrection life of Jesus also may be evidenced through the flesh, which is liable to death. Thus death is actively at work in us, but life may be actively at work in you. Do you see the profoundness here? Do you see how that links with Lazarus? Do you know that when Lazarus was raised, you know what happened? Many left the sect of the Pharisees and followed Christ because they don't know him according to the flesh anymore. Do you know what will happen if resurrection life comes into your life? People might just have a hope. Anyway, Just quickly, I'm not going to go in detail, there's not enough time. But if you look at Romans 4, you'll see Abraham also brought to this place of extremity. God makes him a promise and then leaves him to grow old and beyond personal capability. And he had to transition from hope to hope, from a natural hope to a hope in God. Because everything was brought to a place of decay. Further, we see in the example of Sarah and Hagar something that you need to take cognizance of. You see, the promise was made, and Hagar got a son quickly. You see, folks, the flesh will produce quickly and always mock that which is of the Spirit. And you will think that you are now impoverished and God is not answering. But you know, God does not need to respond to human urgency. He acts on divine plan. Can you even believe that? How many of you, in the place where you are right now, got embittered towards God because things didn't go your way? You didn't get what you want. Maybe if you got what you want, it would have ruined you forever. Don't you know you have a Father that knows better? And He knows pretty well how to deal with that thing that reeks of flesh. Isn't it interesting that even decomposing flesh stinks? Nobody wants to go near it. Stinks while it's alive, and now it stinks while it's dead. And so that the flesh will produce quickly. And that which is of the Spirit gets tempted to go into despair. Look at Sarah. Oh, she's got a child. I'm mocked. Okay, but the Lord's going to let you come to a full end of your own ability. So that there is really no more hope in the natural, because only that which is in the supernatural can please God. Let's look at this. 2 Corinthians 1:8 is one of my favorite portions of Scripture in context of this theme. For we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about the affliction and oppressing distress which befell us in Asia, how we were so utterly and unbearably weighed down and crushed that we despaired even of life itself. Look, you can have hope. A few things. Oh, I have three ropes to hold on to. There goes the one. Then there goes the other one. And the last one. Oh, at least I'm alive. You know, I can still make a new plan. And then even that gets stripped off. And he says, I got to such a place of despair that I despaired of life itself. This is the end of me. There's nothing left. I can't see how I'm going to go forward. I can't see how ever the Lord is going to use me or do anything. I thought I loved Him. I thought He loved me. But it all is on the rocks. Indeed, we felt within ourselves that we had received the very sentence of death. But that was to keep us from trusting and depending on ourselves instead of on God who raised the dead. Yeah, that is so powerful. What is he saying? He said, you know what? This was necessary. I felt being given over to death, but you know why? I mean, you know who this man was as Saul, right? He had a religious zeal for the God without life. And God had to take this very strong man and bring him to a place where he despaired. But don't you know, despair is the gateway to true faith? You see, you can have faith in God, but can you have faith in God after everything is destroyed? Don't you know that is real faith? Don't you know that's where faith actually begins? Until we despair of life itself, we will not truly trust the one who gives life beyond death. It's so important for me that I'm going to repeat it again. Until we despair of life itself, we will not truly trust the one who gives life beyond death. Are you willing for that? These are really serious, pressing questions. It's really uncomfortable. But nobody's going to force it on you. Don't despair of that. You see, Jesus loved this man, and this man loved Jesus. And that's what counts. If I love him, can I trust him? You see, folks, because in essence, faith is trust in the character of God, even though I don't understand. You see, this momentary affliction, there's something deeper at play here. I'm sorry, I'm just running out of time here. But go and have a look at the scriptures about a necessary death. I've pointed it out for you. Death to self, crucifixion of the flesh, and then resurrection life, the transformation of the inner man, fruitfulness, and then an identity shift. There's a logical sequence that now follows. First, a death to self and a life in God. There's a crucifixion of the flesh. Then there's a resurrection life by the Spirit. And after that resurrection life, there's a transformation and a renewal. And then there's fruitfulness after that death. And then there's a move, a transition of natural, limited faith towards the supernatural. Come what may. Don't you know that death is that ultimate enemy for all of us? Not just in the natural, but also as far as our personal lives are concerned, in the practical everyday. But if I've got my hand in the hand of the one who's resurrection life, then I don't see the problem. The only problem is actually wanting to put your hand there. Do you believe this? Challenging question. It reverberates literally through the ages for all Christians. You see, there's a sequence. I'm going to conclude. Resurrection life brings us to a place of living in the Spirit. Resurrection life now brings us to a place of living to the glory of God. Resurrection life is an identity with identifying with Christ, but it enables God to form Christ within us. How can I say Christ needs to be formed in me, but I'm not taking the first step of what Messiah took? To die and to be resurrected, to live a resurrection life. And then the most important thing, you see, this resurrection life brings the Spirit of Christ within us. And now we can love redemptively. Because the only thing that can redeem is resurrection life. See, what happened here is this. Now a great crowd of Jews heard that he was at Bethany, and they came there not only because of Jesus, but that they also might see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. Now look at this, verse 11. Because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing and adhering to Jesus. Could that be true for you? On account of the resurrection life, because you were brought to a death, many will believe. You see, folks, we don't change people through mere words. It's a demonstration. You can't bring a message without being it. John 11:4, when Jesus received the message, he said, the sickness is not to end in death, but to the honor of God. It became redemptive, not just for Lazarus, but for those around him. And then, folks, I want to end off with this consideration. You see, many of you might be at that point where you are brought to a despair of even life itself. And you might think that God has deserted you. Behold, I go forward and to the east, but he's not there. This is the man brought to a place of death and extremity. I go backwards, but I can't perceive him. Where is God? On the left hand, where he works, I seek him, but I cannot behold him. He turns himself to the right hand and to the south, but I cannot see him. But look at this. But he knows the way that I take. I might not see and understand. He knows the way that I take. He has concern for it, appreciates and pays attention to it. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as refined gold. Amen. I pray that that will be true, and that you'll have a faith that transitions because of his work. And I pray that you'll take this message to heart. It's not my message. It's one that I particularly also find very uncomfortable. But I know. This is him that says, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me, though he was dead, yet shall he live. Do you believe this? Amen.